you for being with us this morning. It's a pleasure to see that we didn't bore you yesterday, but the interest remains. Yesterday was an excellent start. We heard from a number, from you that a growing number of consumers want to buy sustainable products and that governments want to make this possible. As Antonia Banner of Nestle, I don't know if Antonia is with us, but as she said yesterday, it is not just about educating consumers, it's about offering them informed choices. And with the many hundreds of voluntary standards on the market and with the challenge that this means for farmers and suppliers to meet them, this is not a simple task. And this is why we created the standards map some years ago. And it was very interesting to see yesterday how issues are sensitive, and at the time these were very sensitive issues such as child labor, such as slavery, such as human rights, can now be very openly, clearly, loudly discussed in a room like this one, and companies taking a lot of pride in making sure they are banned from their practices. But all of this, in my view, shows that there is a need for common principles and there is a need for action. At our first Trade for Sustainable Development Forum last year, we launched a set of principles, the four main core values that we spoke about yesterday: transparency, sustainability, harmonization, and alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We shared with you that more than 50 companies and organizations have endorsed these principles. Today, what we would like to hear from you is how much the landscape has changed since we launched these principles last year, and what are the new emerging trends, and how these principles need to take account of these new emerging trends. We also want to hear from you how the market, what changes you have introduced to your operations and what else you intend to do to align your operations to those principles. We have been listening and working with many of you. We have developed a tool that will help address some of the concerns that were raised last time. We did this by launching the Blue Number initiative together with the UN Global Compact and GS1, as we mentioned yesterday. This initiative, again, starting from a global registry with more than 60,000 companies registered already now, will move into a sustainability marketplace at the beginning of next year, in what we hope will be a platform to help farmers, help producers, help agri-food SMEs to connect, to compete, and to change towards more sustainable production and to continue to contribute towards the Sustainable Development Goals, which are so critical in agriculture. So we today want to hear your views. We've given you a bit of a sneak preview. We've been working with some of you to develop this system. We want to hear your views. Are there things we need to change or adjust in the way in which this initiative has been constructed so that it fits exactly those needs that I've just described? We know that when the small and medium enterprises can connect with higher-end markets, which is at the end of the day a goal we want to promote through these initiatives, when they do this in a more sustainable manner, we know that it means better productivity, it means higher incomes, it means more jobs, and this will help the many smallholder farmers, many women, and many young that is going to be essential for equitable societies. Now, I also want to bring into this picture the fact that all of this has to also feed or contribute to our fight on climate change, with the COP21 happening at the end of the year. We also see this as an initiative that can feed into more sustainable agriculture, one that adapts better to the challenges of climate change. But to kick off today's discussion, I would like to now introduce Christian Frispach. He's not only my colleague and a good friend, he's the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. And just talking to him, I discovered, maybe it's part of my ignorance, but I discovered that UNEC is a standard setter related to product characteristics that are crucial to market access for those who want to have market access in Europe. So, Christian, we want to hear from you, from your experience in setting those standards, but also from your experience in capacitating growers to meet the demands of this market. Thank you very much for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ranja, for inviting us and for the good partnership we have. You also, and working closely together, because I think it's a brilliant match between UNECE being very much the standard setting organization and ICC being very much an organization reaching out, capacity building with authorities, but primarily with companies around in the world, and allowing and ensuring that even small and medium-sized companies can reach the global market. Now, Charles Clark and I, who's on the panel, we just was reminded when we first met, it was in Marrakesh in 1994, at the conference that established the World Trade Organization. We were two of the few NGOs there, sneaking in on government badges and press badges, because you couldn't be an NGO back then in GATT negotiations. And back then, trade law existed very much in isolation from everything else, and especially the trade law developed in GATT. And it had no clear links to environment issues or development issues. Today, the world has moved a lot, and trade law is not in isolation, and trade practice is not in isolation, and that is what is being discussed here today. How can trade now really be a driver also for sustainable development? How can we create supply chains in support of sustainable development? So a lot has moved in the past more than 20 years. And this is true on the marketplace as well. Standards, traceability, supply chains constructed to support sustainable development. It's not without problems. When I worked at the university, I was co-advisor on a PhD that did really surveys in Kenya on how standards affected farmers and producers. And what happened was, of course, that many farmers, small-scale farmers, were squeezed out of the supply chain because of standards, increasing demands to standards. And even if they could meet their demands and the standard, and they could produce according to the standard, which many of them could, they could not prove that they could meet the standards because there was lack of laboratories or certification schemes or whatever. So they were squeezed out. Small-scale farmers in large numbers were squeezed out of the supply chain when standards came in. So the standards in support of sustainable development and consumer preferences can easily affect the smallest companies and the weakest farmers the most, and squeeze them out of the marketplace. Of course, there have also been questions with consumers, and where many of you know, and Ranja especially knows it because she had to defend it, that the European Union was heavily criticized years back because they dealt with something as silly as the shape of cucumbers. It was a heavy critique, and it was a no-no in Europe. You know, the press was full of it. Look at this body, the European Union, trying to save the world by dealing with the shape of cucumbers. Now, this debate was wrong for three different reasons. First and foremost, it was not the European Union doing the standard, it was UNECE who did the standard. And so the target was wrong, but the European Union kind of wanted to endorse these standards. So that was the first mistake. And the second, and we do more than 100 agricultural standards. Mika, sitting down here, you will tell more about it later on in a panel. Not always recognized, but these standards are actually quite important. The second reason why it was wrong, this debate, was it is true that a cucumber has to be fairly straight, but that is primarily if it's an extra class or class 1 cucumber. Those cucumbers can only bend 10 millimeters per 10 centimeters. That's the standard. But you can also buy a class 2 cucumber, and a class 2 cucumber can actually bend 20 millimeters per 10 centimeters. And then there are also there are exceptions. So some of the cucumbers can be slightly more crooked, and there are also 10% of them can be quite crooked. So this is the standard. So it's not true that they can only be straight. You can buy a class 2 cucumber and they can be more vended. So the standards take into account that there are various cucumbers, but if you want a class 1 cucumber, or extra class, and you want that often because it fits into your machine. You can chop up the cucumber. So it fits into your supply chain, then you want to buy extra class or class 1. So that's the second reason why it was wrong. And the third reason why it's wrong is that these standards are very useful. They are actually guiding a significant part of international trade, and it allows consumers and companies to buy cucumbers that can fit into a machine or that can look nice on the table or have high quality and is graded and quality controlled according to a standard. It's very useful, of course, for companies. They can call Georgia or Greece, or you can call Morocco or Kenya and say, I want to buy apples, and they have to be quality 1. And that's it. You get quality 1 apples, and the size and the shape and the color, whatever, and all things are defined. So you don't have to go all the way to Kenya or Morocco to buy your products. So it really facilitates trade. And it facilitates trade also with small and medium-sized companies if they can get the needed support to implement the standards. So it's a trading language, and that is part of what is being discussed here today, of course, how traceability, supply chains can be constructed in support of sustainable development. And if you do it, it will greatly support the historic sustainable development goals that we adopted. Friday, Arantxa and I was there in New York when they were adopted, the sustainable development goals. And a significant part of these sustainable development goals are all about facilitating the trade in support of eradicating hunger, ensuring food security, quality education, sustainable economic growth, consumption and production, sustainable patterns, combating climate change by disaster risk reduction through standards, means of implementation, global partnership. All these goals are relevant for what we're discussing here today. And this is why I think this is a great venue and a very important conference to discuss exactly how to develop these supply chains in support of sustainable development. As I said, we look forward to an improved and increased cooperation with ICC. We have a perfect match. We can do standards, you can do impact and implementation of those standards, and even with some of the small and medium-sized companies and producers that really need our support, because those are the ones that can make sure that we do not, as we promised each other Friday, leave anybody behind. Thank you very much for a great initiative. Thank you for inviting us. I wish you a very good discussion.
Thank you very much, Arantxa. Thank you very much, Christian, for kicking off the day and for helping to set the scene. Yesterday was very much a scene setter. Arantxa has already commented on some of the issues that we've addressed. Today is really going to be about unpacking some of these issues in more detail and drilling down a little bit further into some of these issues. The first session of the day is on the trade for sustainable development. And what we're going to do is, we're going to focus on in this morning's discussion, is really how principles can be embraced by signatories, existing ones, new ones, lessons that can be learned 12 months after the launching of the Trade for Sustainable Development Principles, and how sustainability impacts global supply chains. The format for this morning is going to be relatively straightforward. We have an excellent lineup of speakers, and each speaker is going to have 5 minutes at the outset to make some opening remarks. We'll have a few slides of some of the speakers. I'm going to ask a quick follow-up question to each speaker. Once we run through that, we'll have a bit of a discussion amongst ourselves here, and then we'll start to bring you in, and we'll take comments and questions from the floor. I'm going to introduce the panel in the order that they will be speaking, so I'm going to be doing a bit of jumping back and forth. It is in the order that is on the program. And we're going to be starting with Charles Clark, who is the head of the 10YFP Secretariat. And I've promised to explain what that means in case you are a little bit confused. Which is part of the United Nations Environment Program. Then we're going to hear from Dave Olsely, who is the Senior Manager at Learning and Innovation at the Dutch Sustainable Trade Initiative. Then we're going to move to Karen Sorrell, who is on my right, who is a Supply Chain Manager for the Vector Cotton Initiative. Then we're going to have Maura Webb, who is a policy advisor for Code ECP. Then we have Julia Bernot, who is a data and information manager at the Research Institute of Organic Agriculture. And last but not least, we have Michael Lamont, the Standards and Database Coordinator at ITC, right here. We're going to go right into it, and Charles, I'm going to hand over to you. You have approximately 5 minutes, and if you have any slides, there's a little one. Right. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank ITC, Anisha and Joe very much for this opportunity to address a very important group of people working on trade in a very practical manner. I consider ITC's work some of the best that's done on trade, and particularly the work on sustainable supply chains, which is at the core of our mandate, which is out of the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production patterns. A few of you will have heard this. It was in paragraph 226 of the Rio Plus 20 outcome document. It was the only thing actually adopted at Rio. The word adopt only appears in the paragraph. It is a capacity building mechanism to enable the shift to sustainable consumption and production patterns, and it will deliver that support at regional and national level, which is very important. Whilst it's a global framework, it has to work at regional and national levels, which is why many of you in this room, we hope to engage you in this framework and its programs. Since Rio, we also have an SDG on ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns with 11 targets. We also have SCP in targets in 12 of the other SDGs. So we have this objective of shifting to sustainable consumption and production patterns embedded and interwoven through the SDGs. It is, of course, an enormous task, shifting to sustainable consumption and production patterns. It's the majority of our economic activities. We in UNEP are a currently 7-person secretariat. We have 6 programs in this framework, each of them with the leadership of about 3 or 4 institutions and with multi-stakeholder advisory committees of another 20 institutions. The consumer information program, I think, will be of particular interest to ITC and many of you. It's led by the Ministry of the Environment of Indonesia and Germany, and it has the NGO Consumers International as the third lead. These are very much multi-stakeholder programs. ITC is one of approximately 20 members of the multi-stakeholder advisory committee and is already playing a critical role in helping us develop flagship projects. Joe was with us in Paris in July, and lending the sustainable consumption production is about rejigging our supply chains, making them sustainable, getting the actors in, the governments who design the policies, the private sector who make the products, the consumers who choose the products, changing what they think, what they do, and what the outcomes are. There are initially 6 programs: consumer information, sustainable lifestyles and education, sustainable building and construction, sustainable tourism, sustainable food systems, and sustainable public procurement. I think ITC is now formally a partner in at least 2 of those programs. We have a trust fund which offers the possibility to do projects of the order of about $200,000. We have 3 sustainable public procurement projects running currently in Uruguay, South Africa, and the Philippines, at national, provincial, and municipal levels. And there is a huge potential, we believe, in programs like that to undertake multi-stakeholder actions which will link SME producers in developing countries with markets, not just in their own countries, but with other countries. But we know, we're very aware that we won't achieve this Rio Plus 20 mandate without many people like you engaged in this program. I'm just going to briefly give you 3 targets from the SDGs, which the 10th field helps to fulfill. So, for example, the Consumer Information Program, which is going to support the implementation of tools like eco-labels, voluntary standards, life cycle approaches, and will direct a lot of its support to SMEs in developing countries so that they don't do that, so it won't happen to them what Christian described for those Kenyan producers. By changing this, they won't get locked down in markets. That is crucial. Unless we bring those producers along, unless we leave them behind, we're not actually fulfilling the SDG mandate. And this target 12.8 in the SDGs, which is in the SCP goal, is on ensuring that people everywhere have the relevant information and awareness for sustainable development and lifestyles. The Consumer Information Program will help improve availability, accessibility, and quality of consumer information. And it also has a work activity area on driving behavioural change, particularly of consumers, but also basically of businesses and policymakers when they're making policies. Target 12.7 of this same SEP goal is on promoting sustainable public procurement practices. The sustainable public procurement practice will support implementation of SPP policies and practices at national levels. It is collaborating with the private sector on eco-labelling, sustainability standards and purchasing guidance for SPP in key sectors, and it's identifying barriers to SPP implementation. Last one I want to mention, target 2.4 in the SDG on ending hunger and achieving food security. This target says by 2030 ensure sustainable production systems and implement resilient agricultural practices that increase productivity in production and help maintain ecosystems. In some sense, this SIC program, which is going to launch at Milan Expo on the 22nd of October, is the most interesting and the most critical. It will engage government, the private sector and civil society in constructing sustainable food systems within food supply chains. It's enormous, it's a hugely important issue. It will be led by a developed and developing country, and we believe a very large environmental NGO and a large development NGO. We hope that many of you in this will be interested in this particular program and the other ones. We think the Blue Number initiative that Joe launched with others in New York could play a major role in helping bring new partners to this program and could be a really important tool for developing sustainable supply chains in the food sector. Thank you. And that's what the 10th is.
Thank you very much, Charles. While you take a seat, I just want to ask a quick follow-up question. You already touched on it in your presentation. You said that the SDGs really will only have meaning if won't have much meaning unless we give money behind. And SMEs, particularly SMEs in emerging regions and developing countries, are really what we're talking about when it comes to that. Or they are a group that are very hard to bring into this and make sure that they're part of a meaningful part of supply chains and sustainable development. What do you see in the next few years as really the most impactful trends that are going to really affect and shape this landscape in terms of SMEs in emerging regions?
I think the most important thing, I mentioned it yesterday when I asked a question about PCI, it's about focusing capacity building at that level. That the effort in the Better Common Initiative, whereby a large multinational basically provided finance to approximately 3,000 Indian and Pakistani farmers so they could change their cotton production system, so they could supply sustainable cotton to be sold in European markets. The question is how we do that. ITC does that as their bread and butter, they're a small organisation. UNEP does it as part of their work. our budgets are dwarfed by those of multinational companies. If there are multinational companies out there who are willing to do this, who don't actually know how to do agricultural extension services at the level of understanding what they need for, what is the coalition that you actually need to put together on the ground with adequate financial backing, which actually enables those SMEs to retain their markets because they shifted to sustainable products. That trend is breaking out, across the world, but it's always at small scale, and it's always one or two actors trying to do it. And this is a complex and large task requiring a lot of skills. So I think the trend that it's almost too early to call it a trend, is that approach which we're starting to see has to be scaled up 10, 100 times. And we have to put some examples out there, which then show the rest of the world what can be done if you work this way in those countries.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles. I'm aware that the question you said wasn't addressed yesterday. Luckily, we have Karen with us here who promised to give us a comprehensive response to it, not to push you in the spot. Moving on, and just as a general comment, one of the panelists asked before we went up here whether or not they have to present from the lecterns. It's entirely up to you. If you'd like to stay in your seat, you're more than welcome to do so. But I'm going to hand over to you, David.
Good morning. Thank you. As I said, my name is Dave Boten. My name is Dave Boten. I'm part of the IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative, based in the Netherlands. We are a public-private partnership facility that co-invests with the private sector into making sector transformation possible, making sustainable sourcing possible. We do so with the help of a number of governments in Europe, the Swiss government, SECO, Dutch government, and India. I would like to start my contribution to today's discussion with a statement on the role of standards. We believe in our programs, we're working about 11 quality programs currently, that standards are an essential component in moving towards sustainability and sector transformation. But moreover, we also believe that the benchmarking of and the working towards equivalence of standards is an essential ingredient towards that success. Well, how have we come to that conclusion, or let's say, how have we come to that first observation that those two processes are crucial? I would like to use our experiences in the fruit and vegetable sector, a program that we started halfway 2012, and that we constructed on basis of 3 work streams. And basically, we convened a number of companies, traders, retailers, initially in the Netherlands, who had a commitment to increase their sustainable sourcing in terms of purchasing and sustainability being defined as compliant with a selection of social and environmental standards. That public statement, that covenant, was initially signed by 12 companies, and over time until now has expanded rapidly into a large group of over 35 companies. The commitments that they made was basically to move from 30% of their volume sourced from Africa, Asia, and Latin America up to 100% by 2020. So a commitment that was measurable, that could be monitored, but that also had a substantial impact in terms of the actual volumes coming into their stores. The second work stream in that program relates to the benchmark, and GSCP, the Global Social Compliance Program, has been a partner in that process. So working from existing standards in the industry, but also working towards benchmarking on equivalence has been a starting point to define and monitor that sustainability commitment. A number of standards already in that basket include the SCI, ETI, SA1000, and a number of others. And let's say on that side, on that workstream also, we see that increasingly we get more standards on board. to go through that improvement process. And last but not least, the third flow work stream in that program has been the producer support. And defining the requirements is one, but enabling producers to actually meet those requirements is another piece of work. And that's where also the producer support programs, together with implementing partners in the South, comes in, capacity building at field level. Well, that's the framing, but just to give a sight on how does that relate to my first statement that this package is going to help us towards market transformation, and that benchmarking equivalents are important for that. Just I want to share some first facts and figures. So a large support for the, let's say, for the design of the work, working with existing standards for those companies who really are serious about sustainable sourcing. And I think the increase in signatories in our covenant is a demonstration of that. Usually with many Dutch companies right now, internationals like Dolce, Vita, Marks and Spencers have come to the same level of commitment, agreeing that with this basket of standards, actually we have a workable solution to mainstream sustainable sourcing. With regards to the monitoring of these commitments, we've engaged with a third party. We've set up a system where the actual sourcing data, the company data on their purchases are being managed, controlled, inspected by PricewaterhouseCoopers as an independent third party. And we've seen quite some progress that gives us the confidence that this is the way forward. So in terms of metric tons certified in the first 2 years, 2013 to 2014, we saw an increase of 169%. The share of sustainable sourcing by now has already achieved 66% of total volumes of fruit and veg procured from those origins. And so there is an overperformance on those initial commitments. The monitoring aspect, the important part, we see that before it's a self-declared system where PricewaterhouseCoopers does the assessment afterwards, we still see quite some corrections in volume reported and actual volumes approved. So the internal control systems and the availability of the document trails, the compliance with the certifications, having valid certifications in place throughout the value chain is a challenge that we need to meet. The important other observation is that what we see with regards to meeting the commitments over the years, that both the large companies and the small and medium companies basically on average have the same level of achievement. So it's not necessarily true that it's only the big guys who can meet those requirements. We fortunately see that also the smaller trading companies are actually able to comply with those sourcing commitments. What we see happening also in this first 3 years is that basically the reporting of those companies improves in terms of data quality, improves in the terms of level of commitment inside companies, but it also shows in terms of those document trails that have to be in place up to the level of production is moving companies towards more preferred supplier type of relationships, moving away from spot market purchases into more stable, more traceable supply chain relations. In terms of the future of our work, we see at both levels the increasing interest. So the number of companies willing to engage, but also new standards like EU suites, like primers, like Tesco's T4 type of standards have an interest to go through this benchmarking and equivalence process. Well, to wrap up, we are about to make an in-depth study together with the ITC team on what are the benefits of this benchmarking and equivalence. We see the market transformations happening, but can we get a better hold of the actual perceived and actual benefits at company level? And on an anecdotal basis, talking to the participating companies, we see a few. For example, companies reflecting that the management systems internally improve. They become more effective in the reporting and the monitoring, and there's a reduction of corrective actions in the systems. And some even say that it relates to quality of food. Another interesting observation I get is that working with those standards, basket of standards, companies say that it helps them to better meets regulatory compliance, current regulations, but also prepares them apparently for future regulations and regulatory change. Interesting observation with regards to the role, I think, of public sector in this. And then a sort of internal cultural change that companies are witnessing in terms of knowledge levels on sustainability inside their companies, the focus they have on this theme, and the higher level of awareness and commitments. Well, these are all just first observations. Hopefully in the next edition we will actually be able to report a bit more on profound research in those fields. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. By way of a quick follow-up question. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. A quick follow-up question, and just moving out a little bit, which actors do you see as really the most influential in promoting sustainability in supply chains? And you touched on this. What is the role of public authorities versus private companies in moving this forward?
Yeah, if we look at our fresh produce industry, of course, retail has an immense role to play in terms of basically requiring this type of commitments towards the supply chain. In practice, we also see that the service providers, the traders in between, play an immense role in materializing those commitments, really rolling it out in the supply chain. Last but not least, of course, producers in that place. But I do think that the supply chain captains often play an important role in that field. I think increasingly we are aware that that public regulations support the public sector, in addition to the voluntary private standards, is of high importance. Without appropriate enforcement of pesticide laws, without appropriate enforcement of, let's say, the more social compliance related topics, standards won't be able to deliver the full job. And so I think the agenda on work beyond certification is still out there. It is an acknowledgement, I think, that we also share with many of the standard bodies. And we need the standards definitely in getting this type of market transformation process going. When it comes to a meaningful change in the supply chain, in the field, role of public sector is definitely important.
Great, thank you very much, Dave. I'm going to move on and hand over to Karen Sorrell of PCI. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Thank you very much for having me here, first of all, and thank you for the challenge. Let me just give you a little information about PCI. We're a small NGO based here in Geneva, Switzerland, with offices in Vietnam, Pakistan, London, and a couple of staff members in the altogether, I think we're a team of 50 people. And in 2014-15 cotton season, we were able to license about 8% of the global cotton supply as better cotton. We're the holders of the Better Cotton Standards system. And as a small team, as you can imagine, we work with a large number of partners, strategic partners, and implementing partners. As Dave was mentioning, benchmarking is one of our strongest weapons, I would say. Our first harvest, by the way, was in 2010. So this is our 5th year, and we went from 0 to 8% of the global cotton supply. So that required quite a fast pace of expansion. And we're talking about 2 million tons of cotton grown in 200 different countries. There was no way that we could achieve this on our own as an NGO, or just working with the governments, or just working with a small number of retailers. A lot of different factors, so they had to come together to allow us to get to where we are today. Our aim is to reach 30% of the global cotton supply by 2020. So we have quite a lot of work to be done in the next 5 years for us. And I have no doubt that we'll actually hit the targets. 30% of the global cotton supply, we see this as a critical mass. I think after that, our expansion could be happening at an even faster pace. 30% to us also represents sort of going from being a niche product to mainstreaming. I think one of the factors that really help us is in terms of uptake of what we license at the farm level into the supply chain is the fact that we try really hard to avoid premiums. I think talking about smaller, medium enterprises as well as large multinational stakeholders, everybody is very conscious about prices. Everybody likes the idea of sustainability, everybody wants to support it, but not many people want to actually pay for it. So, so I think one of the, to tackle this, we've taken a look at previous initiatives in sustainability in government, and we try to improve on what they started. So when we talk about cotton, for example, today, we have the organic trade BCI, and nowadays I'm seeing more and more recycled cotton being demanded by the retailers. Among the three standards, fair trade, organic, and BCI, and I think we're quite larger than the other two standards. The way we were able to reach the scale we did was changing, I think, one thing, and that was our chain of custody requirements. If you want what you license or certify at the farm level to be uptaken in the supply chain, I think you have to make it easy for suppliers to do this, and we have to come up with a very simple to use traceable system. And we have all of those. I've been with BCI for 2.5 years, and 2.5 years ago we started a brand new traceable system. It was, you're familiar with the textile supply chain, start with the farmers, and then we have ginners, traders, spinners, fabric mills, and then garment manufacturers and retail. So it's, I think, one of the most complex supply chains in the world, no matter which industry we're talking about. For example, when we compare coffee, it's much more complicated than coffee. We just have 2-3 different supply chain actors, and that's pretty much it. Things are quite transparent, but when it comes to cotton, you have no idea how much that cotton travels and how many hands it changes and how many times it's packed and shipped from one place to another. So, but when we started to trace the system, we didn't have any members. And we don't have any users of the system. Today we have thousands of people using it, and we got to this point in 2 years. At the same time, we got buying from ginners, spinners, traders, today world's largest cotton merchants, such as Arctic Labels, that are some of our biggest supporters, for example. And they're all using our traceable system simply because it's easy to use. We just did everything we could to make it practical and easy. And I think these types of things really help with the uptake. In terms of chain of custody requirements, again, a lot of our retailers would like to put tags on over their clothes saying there's better than this product. We didn't allow that in the beginning. And we didn't go for physical traceability. Instead, we implemented a mass balancing system, which I think really made it much easier for all the smaller and larger suppliers to source better equipment and use it in their production. And with the combination of an easy-to-use traceable system, they were able to report their sourcing efforts and volumes back to their customers in a very practical manner. So I think these things coming together helped us quite a bit with the uptake. In terms of setup, BCI is a true multi-stakeholder organization. In cotton industry, for example, one of the most popular organizations is ICA, International Cotton Association. They are known as the Merchants Club, for example, because they were formed by one of the largest commodities trading companies in the world,
and they have a certain reputation. Even though they're not an ideal like they see it. But BCI doesn't have such reputation. We are governed by farmers, retailers, traders, suppliers, and other NGOs. Our council is made up of 12 members, and each segment of the supply chain is represented equally in this council. So we don't favor retailers, we don't favor traders. And I think this really, this setup really promotes trust in supply chain actors. So people have this ownership, I think, in the organization, and that really also contributes to our vast extension in the government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. You mentioned that the target is to license 30% of global cotton supply by 2020. And you also made the point that cotton pooling is one of the most complex supply chains that you can find. How does this break down geographically? What are some of the differences and some of the challenges that you face there? For example, trying to drive sustainability in West African cotton production, for example, versus North American cotton production. Presumably, it's quite a different ballgame.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every country has a different set of challenges, a set of different industries set up, a different culture around cotton production, a different history. For example, talk about Western Africa. I receive a lot of calls from other NGOs that are interested in development in certain countries in Africa, is of course a popular destination for that. And I often get asked this question: how come the cotton that's grown in Africa has to be exported elsewhere to be spun into yarn? How come there's no spinning capacity in Africa? And for example, talked about Western Africa, which is quite a major source of cotton production in the world. I think out of the 2 million tons that we licensed last year, about 350,000 tons came from Africa. There's just no spinning mills, there's just no fabric mills, retailers, but when you buy a t-shirt, it never says made in Burkina Faso, but there's a big chance that the cotton was actually grown in Burkina Faso. So how come we don't have these infrastructures in some of the parts of the world, and this cotton has to be exported first to Bangladesh or into yarn or India, and then shipped to Bangladesh, turned into fabric, and then shipped to China, and then finally converted into some sort of garment that ended up in our shelves here in Europe or elsewhere. So every country has a different set of challenges and an industry setup. The way we were able to, I think, reach out to 20 different countries was, again, going back to what Kay was talking about, benchmarking. We have 3 benchmarking agreements as BCI as of today, and these agreements helped us quite a bit. There's no need for us or for anyone else, I think, to reinvent the wheel. If there's an existing sustainability standard or initiative that the world, we should just recognize their efforts and try to work with them instead of imposing a whole different set of rules and customs and traceability requirements that might be actually quite similar to what already exists. So what we have done in Brazil, for example, Brazil has a national sustainable standards for cotton production called ADR standards. APRAFA is the organization that implements these standards. So instead of going farmer to farmer in Brazil, and Brazil is a very unique country, the cotton production is done by large farms being having one farm owning thousands of acres, if you will. For example, we work with 208 farms in Brazil, and in total, these guys have produced 800,000 tons of cotton last year. That actually represents half of our cotton. And we didn't have to train these guys one by one. All we had to do was just sit down and talk about and say, what are your standards, what are my standards, let's just compare these two, do they match at a minimum level? They do. Let's just shake hands and your farmers can sell their cotton as better cotton, they can have their license. We've done the same thing in Africa, working with Aid by Tree Foundation. Their brand is CMI Made in Africa. They're doing 12 different countries, including West and East Africa, and they already have a set of standards that they've been implementing in Africa for many years. So again, instead of just trying to reach out to millions of African smallholders, we just sat down with Aid by Tree Foundation and made a benchmarking agreement. And as a result of that, almost benchmarking takes about a year or two, depending on the set of standards and the partner you're talking to. But as a result of that, we were able to reach out to about 700,000 farmers in Africa in 12 countries. So again, like if you pay attention, about 200 farmers in Brazil growing 800,000 tons versus 700,000 farmers in Africa growing 350,000 tons. I think it's very normal that we have different challenges in different countries, and we have to just tackle them, knowing that.
Great, thank you very much, Dr. I'm going to hand over to Maura for the presentation.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to start by thanking ITC for the opportunity to take part today. It's a very interesting forum for us to engage with. I hope I'm not going to be a little bit perhaps not tone party line today, but I'm going to be coming at this much more from sort of practitioner, agricultural, operational side rather than the policy side. So perhaps my contributions will be less sophisticated than the experts that we work as a principal for. First I'll explain briefly. ACP, the organisation I'm representing here today, is a private sector association. We're not for profit, and our members are producers and exporters in Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific countries, and European Union importers of fresh fruit and vegetables. So I'll just be keeping my discussion focused on that sector, which I accept is very different in many ways to some of the other sectors I will be hearing about today, but perhaps it will sort of give a more richness to the discussions. So ACP as an association has been around since 1973, and from that time has been providing services to its members. But since 2001, we've also been managing European Development Fund programmes. Since that time, we've had continuous support through EDF to help the sector. First of all, our initial phase was really very much designed and focused around the new European Union food safety regulations, and within that context, it was designed to help ACP suppliers so that they were able to meet regulatory requirements. It was very much therefore focused on food safety and on regulations. But as time went on, because our overall objective was to ensure that ACP suppliers, particularly the smaller players, particularly smallholders, didn't lose their share of the market, we had to adapt the support that we were providing in order to cover the various other evolving challenges that were facing ACP suppliers. So while the first stop was very much regulatory, very quickly behind that we had private standards that were appearing to provide a framework for compliance and for evaluating compliance and for evidence of compliance to suppliers, particularly global gap on the production side and the various others in the processing side. And so we've evolved since 2001, and latterly our focus has been much more, while food safety is still there, it's the bottom line. If you don't have that, you don't supply, you don't export, you don't access markets. But as well as that, we're increasingly seeing sustainability as being a requirement from the buyer side, and we've been addressing this through the support that we provide to companies. We've also been looking at sustainability within ourselves as an organisation, and sustainability for us goes beyond simply market access. It's actually really trying to embed and ingrain sustainable practices and responsible social and environmental practices. So what we do is to develop capacities of micro, small and medium enterprises and producing organisations, and through them, their smallholder suppliers. We provide technical assistance and safety, but then moving into sustainability. So we provide technical assistance to help those suppliers access domestic, regional and international markets. While our main target is suppliers, we also recognise quite early on in the programme that if you didn't have the enabling environment for that supply chain to flourish in, then you would have problems. It's something that Dave also mentioned. In many countries, we found that we have issues with public sector infrastructure, with public sector educational provision, regulatory authorities, legislation, but also private sector service providers and training institutes. And so quite a lot of our effort goes into addressing that sector. We provide a lot of support to develop local service provision. And we have two different programs that we manage, two different EDF programs. One of those is very much focused on the private sector, and the other is focused on the public sector, ensuring that you have in place the necessary public sector control frameworks. So my focus is going to be very much on food safety, on the ACP fruit and vegetable sector, moving from food safety to sustainability. And also, in terms of our progression over time, we moved from looking exclusively at export markets also to consider local, regional, and now in the future, we're moving also into production for processing. So, perhaps this is a bit sort of the controversial bit where we take a slightly different standpoint. Looking through the literature, listening to some of the presentations, we're talking about sustainability, but there's also a lot of discussion about sustainability standards. And what I want to do is try to explain the approach that we take to it, which is really clearly differentiated between those two things, because they are not the same thing, and one does not necessarily lead to the other, and you can have one without the other. And so, if I illustrate that through the sort of philosophy of the approach we took to supporting food safety, our bottom line was to help companies put in place food safety management systems so that they will meet the regulatory requirements and also meet the requirements of the market. If companies chose to go towards certification, the support we gave them to help them put in place traceability systems, HACCP, etc., would certainly help them to do that. But our bottom line, our aim was not compliance with the standard. Our aim was to help companies produce safe food. And so on the sustainability side, we're very much taking that same perspective. The sustainability standards are one tool in the toolbox. As we go forward in the future, as I said, we are working with our existing network. At the moment, we've had over 1,000 individual projects over the last 10 years. About half of those with service providers and about half with companies. And the companies that we work with are producing, we estimate, over 90% of the fruit, fresh fruits and vegetables that are coming into the European market. So we've got quite a big coverage. We've had a lot of individual projects, but we've had the benefit of over, about 40 years of continuous support, which has enabled us to do that. In terms of major trends, I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to come back to this. To talk about the trends that we've seen in practical terms in what our suppliers have been asked to do and what they've been asked to eat, and what we're helping them to do. But I wanted to mention something that I was reading about. Have we got anybody from IC on here?
I see a member.
IC recently produced a very interesting survey that they've done for over 100 business leaders on the impact of business case for sustainability standards. And there were a few of their conclusions that I wanted to point to. Firstly, businesses agree that there's a strong business case for using sustainability standards, but they feel less convinced that this business case applies to organisations they work with, supply chain partners, traders, clients. And that really reflects something that we've also seen. You can see big business really going wholeheartedly down the sustainability route and using sustainability as a risk management, ensuring sustainability services as a way to operationalise sustainability. But the extent, particularly in the fresh produce sector, that that's actually being applied by them upstream to their suppliers is not as great as we might have expected. Another conclusion is that businesses are largely convinced of the impact of sustainability standards, but there's a lack of evidence to convince their decision makers that standards are effective. This is something that we need to look at. It's all very well to put standards in place, etc. But what's the evidence that they're having impact? And what can we do in terms of actually looking in practice in the field, looking at numerical, statistical data, but also practical data, in order to really understand what's happening. Most emphasis is on labour, environmental degradation and climate change, as you might imagine. And then as part of that survey, they also interviewed some individual companies, and Marks and Spencer's is one of those. And it's an early mover, and it seems to us that could, what Marks and Spencer's experience is quite an interesting one. Another question, do we have anybody from the retail side? We don't have anyone that we can draw on for other experiences in this, but if I give a very quick overview of what Marks and Spencer's had found, they really, as I said, were an early mover. One of their aims was to achieve positive impact on the ground, but also there was an assumption that certification here would form a strong component of their marketing in the Marks and Spencer's Plan A. In other words, they were looking at sustainability really on the differentiation side. However, this is a direct quote, they learned that customers find it difficult to give preference to certified products. Their buying experience is too complex, and there are many factors in their purchasing decisions, with sustainability being segregated behind other product attributes such as price and quality. It's an obvious thing to say, but it's something that we mustn't forget when we sort of keep it really going headlong into looking at standards, measurability, etc. But at the end of the day, what does that translate into? Marks and Spencer found that their customers really appreciated the efforts they were making to source sustainably, but they weren't really looking at this on a product-by-product basis. They were looking at it generally, and they expect Marks and Spencer to deliver on everything that they sell. Marks and Spencer still got a big emphasis on certification, but they use sustainability standards less in terms of consumer communication, which is perhaps different to what we were hearing first thing. It's more of a B2B assurance system. It's something that they use to communicate with NGOs, to communicate with their responsible investors, to give confidence that Marks and Spencer's are being managed and used in socially and environmentally responsible ways. And so that, I think, to a large extent has influenced what we've seen on the fresh produce side in terms of what's being asked of suppliers. Perhaps I can come back to that a bit later on in the discussion. But there are some really big challenges here. You know, one thing is to measure sustainability, make sure that you're doing the right. But what do we do in order to really achieve impact? Well, that's the big challenge. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Thank you very much for putting some really thoughtful points out there as well. This is surrounding this debate. I want to pick up on the work that you do with micro and small, medium-sized enterprises in ACP countries, particularly in regions like Sub-Saharan Africa. The very definition of an SME is something that very little in resemblance to what we would call an SME in places like Western Europe. in practical terms, what are some of the most profound challenges that you face in helping build capacity of that in region by Sub-Saharan Africa, for example?
Like all things, it probably comes down to resources at the end of the day. Everything is possible provided that the resources are there. We work with some very small companies, and the big companies that we work with would probably be classed as small, as you say, in global terms. One of the big challenges we face, as I alluded to earlier, that in many of the countries we work with, you don't have the local infrastructure and the local service providers in order to deliver. So our first port of call is really to make sure you have the necessary support structures in place. You don't want to be relying on international expertise, which is not going to be sustainable or affordable in the long term. You have to have local provision that these very small companies can continue to draw and rely on in the future. In terms of actually promoting adoption and achieving impact, it is possible. GlobeGap, so we have Christine. GlobeGap was such a big challenge when we were looking in sort of 2003 in countries like Kenya. And it was how are we going to get these very small companies and their smallholder suppliers to put in place traceability systems to actually adopt and put in place effective food safety management systems. It is technically possible. It's just that you need the right support structures in place in order to do that and to have the reach. Reaching smallholders is again very difficult, but we try to do that. We try to use a cascade system so that we start with local service providers, with bigger companies, with bigger associations, and we use them as a route to reach down to other players. But there has to be a driver in order to achieve impact, and that's something that, on the food safety side, is a very strong driver. This is something that perhaps we can discuss later in terms of what the drivers, if there are any, on the sustainability side.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Julia for the presentation.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Okay, first of all, a quick introduction. I come from FIBO, Research Institute of Organic Farming, and I'm here representing a partnership between FIBO, IISD, the International Institute for Sustainable Development, and ITC on the collection of market data on sustainable standards. And we have been working this last year and partly in 2014. We have been conducting with 14 standards from different commodities, different sectors, and well, the idea is to process and to collect all data and latest data and on an annual basis to be able to report annually the latest data so everybody is on the same page. And we are preparing the first publication for the end of the year. So it will come and you will see the latest results. And the idea is, as I said, to have it annually. On the other hand, we will have it as well on the standards map, on a new section that is under development. And it has been quite a great experience. We worked a lot on some of the principles from T4SD as well, that is harmonization. We harmonize all our indicators, trying to adapt to the different standards, because the different standards have a different approach to measure things, and as well the different organization, the three of us. So it has been a challenge, but a great process. And transparency, that is another one of the leading points, and I think market data brings a lot to transparency of the market on where we are, where we want to go, etc. We focus on different indicators, but mainly on the area certified and area harvested. The produce organizations work well, and third country on the production volume of each commodity and each standard per country and worldwide. We have developed, as I said, different indicators. We developed a common questionnaire to try to make the like ECF of the standards. We have a common database developed by ITC where all the data is being stored. And we have this publication that we much hope it will be of great resource for policymakers and for research and further development of the market. We selected 8 crops to have the main focus, that is cocoa, coffee, banana, cotton, sugarcane, soybeans, palm oil, and tea. And then we have forestry. On the other side, we have the great standards that helped a lot. But anyway, we want to expand that scope, and we want to cover as much as possible to be able to map the current situation of the sustainable agriculture and the impact worldwide. We had some challenges, like I saw that one of the person here had a global figure on production, and that's a challenge for us because there's a lot of multiple certification and there's not so much information on how much is double certified, and it's really difficult to track back to the country, back to the farm. So it has been a challenge to be able to report a global figure for a certain commodity worldwide. We have seen very interesting different point of views because we have standards that focus on a certain commodities, and then we have other standards that have multiple commodities, and the approach of the market is completely different, and maybe the impact on a certain commodity is different. So I prepared some slides. It's really an overview because the results are quite big. So I tried to select the ones that may address a message for you. Here we have the 14 standards. On the left we have a graph where is the area covered of these standards of these selected 8 crops, commodities, and on the other side, on the right side, we have the total area of the standard. And we can see that they all change according to how you measure it. And rainforest goes to the top if we see it as a whole. But if we see it only on the focus of these commodities, RSPO, that is for palm oil, has quite a lead. It's very interesting to see it because rainforest certifies quite a big range as well as fair trade, organic. They certify a big range of commodities. But there's a strong focus on maybe these 8 big commodities. Then I took cocoa as an example, and here we can see the development for each standard, and we can see that there's a tendency for growth in rainforest and woods, and there's a speed of stagnation with fair trade and organic. And another very interesting thing for us has been to see how is the impact on the different regions. We see that most of the standards here, we have 4 standards working with cocoa, it's food, rainforest, organic, and fair trade. And we can see that most of them are based, the cocoa is based in Africa, but for organic, most of it is in Latin America. So we can see, well, this is mainly because of the Dominican Republic that has quite a large area of organic cocoa. But for fair trade, Latin America is also very important. And we have time, I see. Then another thing is to see, for example, this single commodity that represents a lot, how much impacts in these multiple commodity standards. We can see that for oats, cocoa represents 70% of the total area worldwide, while for organic it's only 0.5% of the area. So we can see the focus of the standard is completely differently, but for them, for rainforest, it's almost as well half. So it's really interesting to analyze this behavior of the different standards, depending if focus on one commodity or if it's multiple commodities. And we have here a graph that, please pay attention, that is not adapted to multiple certification, so it's all sum up. But we can see the tendency of growth of the different commodities. I don't know if you managed to appreciate it from afar, but we can see that there's a tendency of growth in all commodities. There might be ups and downs in certain years, but in long term, there's a growth and steady growth. We try to as well to find data on market data, on retail sales, and nowadays we only manage to gather for organic farming and for fair trade. Fair trade has very interesting data on market data. They have it per country. But for the other standards, it's quite hard, or estimates, and it will be a very interesting thing to see how much is the impact of these standards on the market, on the shelves. And I think that you have done to entertain me. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Just a very, very quick follow-up question. How would, from your experience, from your perspective, how do you think the uptake of certified products can impact the wider sustainability landscape and drive sector transformation?
What a question.
You have about a minute.
First of all, before I forgot, I want to thank the 14 standards for all the cooperation, and it was great help and great supporters, and that I think they show that they are willing to share and to build together. So now to your question. I believe the market is growing and there's more demand. We saw it yesterday, they talked about it. There's still a need to really further investigate the impact, and it's dangerous with this further creation of more standards and more standards. This is competition, and then maybe the market gets a bit confused. So I believe that if we focus on harmonizing and transparency and building together a market, we can have a great impact.
Thank you very much, Julia. We're almost there. Don't worry. We have one more speaker, and then we'll start a little bit of discussion here. Matthew, bringing it all back together, back to the trade for sustainable development principles for resources.
Thank you very much, Landry, and we thank you for the panelists for their contributions to this very interesting session. It's very interesting to be here on this first annual session of this T4SD Forum for today. I mean, exactly a year ago, 2nd October 2015, we launched here the T4SD principles. This session is about, we setting the foundation and the role of the ITC in this area, the T4SD principles. So maybe I could just put that into perspective, what really these principles are, and how does this connect with what the panelists have heard so far today. So I'm the Standards Map Database Coordinator, which means that with my team, we've reviewed many standards. And so we said, okay, should we create for ITC standards? No, there are many standards out there. We don't need a however, we still have created something called the T4SD principles. So what is that? Maybe in order to clarify it, I will rather start by telling you what this is not about. So this is not about the reporting framework. We do not expect the signatories of the principles to actually get back to ITC and say, hey, we've done this and that in order to actually comply with your principles, and so on and so forth. We do not expect membership fees here. We don't expect money from the signatories. Actually, it is the other way around. So the principles, the T4SD principles, are a commitment from ITC to all the signatories. And we will be very busy working with you according to a certain framework of action. So the T4SD principles are organized as action points for signatories to work and collaborate with ITC in delivering our mandate. And ITC has a clear motto, you can see it on the website. It's trade impact for good. ITC develops and disseminates multiple programs. T4SD is only one of them. But it's a critical one in which we believe that by promoting transparency, harmonization, sustainability under the auspices of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, we will achieve something. So the principles, it's like a story. And I love telling stories to my children in the evening. So I will tell you the story like I want to tell them the story. So ITC, we've got this mandate. We want to achieve some good impacts. We want to promote sustainability, like helping small and medium-sized enterprises accessing international markets, and having the trade, the supply chains more efficient. But not just more efficient for the sake of being efficient, being more efficient from the perspective of developmental outcomes, sustainability, sustainable development. So we start with transparency as a concept. Why is it so important? Because transparency means to have the right information at the right time. So this enables you to make more informed decisions. This especially brings trust between trade partners. When you have things more transparent, more clear, you can trust each other better. So it promotes efficiency in the chains. But trust also helps you creating an enabling environment for harmonizing practices, harmonizing market requirements, standards, creating joint ventures, creating avenues for collaboration between private and public sector organizations, companies and NGOs, and so on and so forth. So that's the journey. That's the journey. Transparency fostering the trust enabling an environment for pushing the harmonization agenda. And by pushing the harmonization agenda, being organizations willing to achieve some better goals, trade impact for good, we have the opportunity to actually achieve sustainability objectives of the UN, but also of our respective organizations. So, as of today, we do have 50 organizations that are signatories of the T4SD principles. Every week we have 1 or 2 more coming to the table. There is no restriction on who's going to be signatory of the principles. We do have private sector, multinationals, small and medium-sized enterprises, NGOs, we have private and public organizations, academia, research institutes. The number is growing, and as I said, it's a call for action. The T4SD principles are just a call for action. When we do run some programs in certain regions, cross-specific research for benchmarking activities, we will be your partner in working with this. So that's the T4SD principles, and I believe we've heard this morning already on this first panel, and we will hear it throughout the day. Very good and concrete examples on how some of these principles are put in action by our partners already, where ITC is more than happy to collaborate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matthew. You said you're going to tell stories and tell to your children. I'm going to ask a very simple question as well. Let's say I'm a hypothetical new signatory to the principles. What happens next? I've signed up. What now?
Good question. As a signatory, just maybe focusing your signature on the letter on the endorsement, which is just the endorsement paragraph. I would say, okay, what is it next? What are we expecting, and what is ITC going to do with my endorsement? Right? So let me be very clear. ITC is not an advocacy bureau, pro or con standards or frameworks or initiatives or organizations. We strongly believe that all initiatives are worth working with and encouraging moving towards the sustainability agenda. Along the lines of the principles, so not like blooming up new standards all the time, new codes, countback or framework, but looking about harmonization, transparency, and moving towards sustainability. So if you're a new signatory, we will work with you and identify potentially what are your main challenges and how can we foster innovation by sharing good practices we learn with the other signatories. And there are good examples on that that we will actually for session 3 in the afternoon session. So that remains with us for this innovative part on how this can explain the principles. And this is really what ITC offers to build new nowadays. Let's open a space for discussion and move towards the next step.
Thank you, President. Thank you very much to all of our speakers for your presentations. Now, I'm keen to get some comments and I'm keen to get some questions. We just got a little bit late. If you are keeping an eye on the clock, officially we have 8 minutes, but I think we'll probably spend around 15 minutes or so taking a few comments and questions. If you'd like to just raise your hand, quickly introduce yourself and direct your question either at or at a specific speaker, that would be great. And we'll try and take a round of 2 or 3, not all at once, please. There we go. Yes, thank you very much.
Not too hard for this one.
It's a bit obscure. I was struggling with one.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Natal Del from the World Traders Organization. I have a question actually for the entire panel because I was very happy to hear all the stories and how they're related to sustainability. I didn't hear much about what can be done in the sector of non-commodities, especially non-food products. There was a bit about cotton, but there's a whole range of other products, mainly from less developed countries, which are outside this scope. Is anything else being done out there to cover this perhaps much wider area?
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Yes, please.
There's a couple. Sorry. Thorsten, I'm from PFC. We do forest certifications of the forest sector. I'd like to also ask a question to the entire panel about squaring this circle. Because what we've heard about from some is, of course, that we need to enable an environment, we need the demand for certified products. Very often we then talk about the areas certified. Forestry can claim that we are certified together between FSC and PFC over 400 million hectares of forest globally. But what does this measure mean? What does it measure mean in other areas? Because sustainability is local. Anything is only sustainable if I feel that it is sustainable. It's a burger, it's a family that produces, sees the sustainable income. I was very glad for Karen's comment. On the one hand, talking about the many smallholders and the difficulties in adapting to them. I was also very happy about you talking about we don't want to have any price leaders. Not only because nobody wants to have additional costs, but if you ever want to mainstream sustainability, you cannot work with price leaders. Nobody will ever pay for it. But how do we actually, on the one hand, get the demand satisfied that all the retailers impose on them, but then at the same point in time, make sure that our targets are the smallholders, are those who are directly affected by all the standards that are in place. An additional question, the more smallholders get involved, the more retailers get involved, the more popular certification becomes. And we see that in the forest sector, there are certifications well advanced at 30% of the production being certified. Everybody wants to have a say in what sustainability means. You look at the Dutch government, what the Dutch government expects certification to deliver. Sometimes you think they don't have a clue what's actually going on in South Africa, in Indonesia, in Vietnam. What are the requirements in and what is the local understanding of sustainability? So how do we square the circle between realities on the ground, the needs of smallholders, and satisfying the demand for certified products?
Great, thank you very much. Take one more, yes, please.
Hello, I'm Leo Vasquez of Econ Agro-Industrial Corporation. So we are a large trader of cotton, cocoa, and coffee, and many other items. And we already have global networks where we're dealing with literally hundreds of thousands of farmers all around the world in all these different areas. And my question to, I guess, the entire panel, and I think Charles mentioned it a little bit about how can multinational corporations who are already established out there work with the organizations represented here in this room? What are some more tangible principles, tangible ideas of how we can work together?
Great, thank you very much. So we have a few broad questions, a few general questions directed. I'd like to try and be as focused as possible in responses, but give everyone an opportunity to pick up on some of these issues. But I'm going to say try and keep the responses to about a minute and a half or so. Start with you, David.
Yeah, so maybe very quick, hopefully meaningful answers. The first one, outside food, what do we do? Is there any activity? An example we are working on is, for example, related to the apparel sector, where we don't necessarily push or invest in certification as such, but where the, let's say, the worker management dialogue is very important. So the process towards working our wages, getting that at an appropriate level. And where, for example, the HIG index is a backbone to, let's say, to quantify, objectify those efforts. So I think the answer would be yes, there are other initiatives outside food. With regards to the second question, an important point, I think we acknowledge, and also the Dutch government acknowledges that certification alone won't do the job. And a very practical example, I think, where progressive insight is already materializing is work that we've been doing in tea in Kenya, working with a local supplier, PTDA, engaging over 500,000 smallholder farmers. Still being challenged on the Mau forest, let's say the landscape adjacent or overlapping with tea, where we have basically certified all 500,000 smallholders under a Rainforest Alliance certificate, where we concluded that in order to address issues like fuel wood for smallholders and factories, where water issues in Mau relate to multiple industries, the flower industry, the tea industry, the local communities, and where a landscape approach is currently being designed. So a different stakeholder composition, different engagement of governments and other companies, not alone the tea industry, and where we hopefully get to let's say a different scope of work beyond certification.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any thoughts or would anyone like to comment on some of the issues raised? Charles?
It was really the last question from Ecom on how we work together. There is an approach called collective impact. There is a publication in the Stanford Social Innovation Review that wins a number of 2011, by two guys, John Cameron and Mark Kramer. And it sets out essentially 5 ways to develop collective impact, which is about bringing people around a common agenda. It was first written about the experiences of 14 NGOs working in Seattle in the northwest of the United States on providing education for deprived kids. And they found that they were doing it in a completely disjointed and under-resourced way. And what you require is define a common agenda, develop shared measurement systems, develop mutually reinforcing activities, develop continuous communication, and a backbone support organisation. That paper was written 4 years ago. It's spreading around the world. We've adopted it for the NYFB. We were so struck by it that we wrote a 2-page note adapting it. And we ran a flagship project meeting in July in Paris that was entirely based around that, and some of you were here. Joe was there, Jim was there. This is an extraordinarily powerful approach, and it's summarised in 5 pages in the Stanford Social Innovation Review. So the simple answer is read that paper.
Is that tangible enough? I think there's a bit more selling to be done on that one, but maybe false panel. Right. Fair enough. Anybody else? Yes.
Very briefly, and from our experience talking about the food, non-food, and also those questions around context, we've been seeing the proliferation, so to speak, of initiatives and standards from private and public NGO organizations. And that's very much true. Now, question being, where does innovation space. Innovation is not anymore the tools of reinventing the concept of sustainability. I mean, if you look around the standards and the initiatives, probably 80% is almost the same on the content, on the policy side. Actually, what we've been seeing over the last maybe 2 years, analyzing the standards for the standards mapping for the collaborations with the signatories, is really much that innovation lays in the way the systems actually operate. And this is a very important thing as well for the businesses implementing their sustainability practices in the ground, in local context, is to say, well, it's very nice to have a broad definition on the sustainability goals you want to achieve, but how do you put that into practice? What are the elements that you want to run through, like third-party certification versus self-declaration, reporting mechanism, the engagement with the local stakeholders, the community, the factories, the producers themselves. And this is very much where today, if you look at the emerging trends, you will see a lot of new innovative niches, and especially in the non-food, where those systems have been developed recently around roundtables with business associations, be it on the Apple side, be it with the GSCP across any type of sector. Those meta initiatives try to, again, a little bit harmonize the way they see the developmental impacts and the way they can implement it in the ground. So it's very interesting to see where that is going now that most of the initiatives, and there are still new standards coming up all the time, that's for sure, and new companies will have their own corporate codes, but the way they be implemented is where really innovation is now.
Matthew? Just to answer quickly, let me just start with the question on can we work together. Very last question, we are already working together in Tajikistan. We implemented a BCI project last year. In the US, they were super helpful for us to reach out to growers. And this has been quite a challenging country for us to break into as a European NGO. So ECOM and BCI, we were actually able to work together and had some great impact at the farm level around the world. And we do the same with Cargill, with Redlands, not only with merchants, but with other NGOs, and even supply chain actors such as Kibash, which is a huge spinning mill from Turkey, who agreed to implement our standards in the region where they were already buying cotton from. And this ties my answer for the lady over there, who asked when sustainability is growing, there's great interest, but there's still a lot of countries that are untouched by the sustainability initiatives, perhaps. The way it's great to have sustainability standards, so work together, and I think the impact that we all have, or each have at the farm level, which should be the most important thing, has great importance for our future. But there's the other aspect of it. The retailers and brands have to demand this product, and we have to have a mechanism to pull this product through the supply chain so that people can make claims about this. If they cannot make claims about it, the value to a retailer will be very small because they won't be able to communicate that to their customers. For Better Cotton, for example, I'm pretty sure many of you have never heard of Better Cotton before, simply because we don't allow for home product tax, and yet we still reach 8% of the global cotton supply. As of January, February, first quarter of next year, we will start putting on product tax. So I think the popularity of Better Cotton will really skyrocket from then on once we reach out to consumers. But still, how do we achieve that uptake? We have to work with the existing suppliers of the retailers and see where they buy their raw materials from, and then reach out to those guys and then bring them into the chain. So if I'm working with 75 IK suppliers, and 80% of all cotton IK used this year is Better Cotton, by the way, I have to go to each of those countries. But if they're not working in a certain country, I'm not going to be able to tell IK, why don't you
start buying from those guys because they spend years building these relationships with their suppliers. So it's a bit of an unfortunate situation, but this is how it's working out. Final point, premiums, certification, the government is not a certification, we are a licensing organization. So we are a continuous improvement program to put it in a better way. In terms of the prices, I think pricing can be a big block in terms of the uptake for suppliers of the certain sustainably grown product we're talking about. In order to get over that obstacle, you have to reach a certain scale. There's no way around it really. This is why we started in 2010 with zero license Bettercam around the world, and we went up to 8% in 5 years, and we will go up to 30% in the span of 10 years. The more licensed product you have, I think the less premiums you see, and that's when the uptake really takes off.
I'd like to come back to your question, which I think was very interesting. How do you square the circle? You have buyers, you said, asking for certification. They might be asking for certification because that's what's there. What they really want is evidence of good practice, and perhaps we need to think a little bit outside the box. Are there any other ways of evidencing good practice? What does sustainability mean? It means different things to different people. My experience is more on the retail side, which is perhaps different to many of the others on the panel here. And really, in that context, today, sustainability is reputational risk management. It's doing no harm. It's not really getting to that stage of actually doing good. You know, environmental benefit is not in that agenda. It's not within the certification scope, actually, on the food and veg side at all at the moment. Smallholders. The risk, I mean, this is what we work with day by day. The risk is that certification is going to exclude weaker economic players. And the certification has high recurrent costs, and for the economically marginalised and price squeezed small guys, it's perhaps the cost that it's not fair. And so in this area where we're really looking at sustainability within the context of sustainable development goals, etc., it's really important that is the starting point. We don't want to cut the structure that's already going to exclude some of the players that we most want to help. And so if I go back to the point, we need to think out of the outside the box. How can you perhaps look at other ways of demonstrating good practice that are localised and appropriate for a small context in a developing country, where you're looking at doing good rather than just doing harm? And perhaps looking at it in the context of the business case for that entity, rather than saying, okay, this is a route to market access, and if you tick this box, you can access this market. But if you take another approach and say, if you adopt these practices, it will help you be a more resilient and more efficient business.
Thank you, Mark. Julie, do you have any thoughts?
No, only on regarding that he says only area and what this really represents. Yes, that's data that we are really trying to get and push for it, and it's hard, but we will keep on pushing because there we can see how really all these standards impact the people, impacts the market, and keeps on growing. And it is really sustainable in a trade sense.
Thanks very much. And Charles, you might have a quick follow-up.
There's one about the exclusion of small economic actors. Both the Forest Stewardship Council and the Marine Stewardship Council have programs for developing countries and small producers, because they recognise this as an outset, as a major impediment. Initially, it's still the case that the majority of FSC certifications in the north, but it's much better than it was when it started out. And a lot of the reason for that is that they invested in programs that were specifically designed for developing country producers and small-scale producers. They were not able to do it at scale. I mean, this is where the collective impact approach comes in. This is where institutions like ICC are already doing this in other supply chains, And other parts of the UN, like UNDP, which do the capacity of local government, should actually be working together to make it possible to reduce the costs of certification. Because at the end of the day, I don't really believe in self-declaration. The consumer doesn't. They want what you said. They want to be shown that this is the case. And the only way you can show this is the case really is third-party verification. And in a sense, certification may not be the only solution, but it leads the way. That's what the consumer wants. The consumer is very, very skeptical. Don't forget that.
Thank you very much. It's 13 past the hour. I think we started about 12 to 13 minutes late, so pretty much still, believe it or not, on schedule. There's not much to be said. You've covered a lot of ground, a lot of different issues, a lot of big, complex issues here. We are going to break now, and we're going to reconvene at around 11:30. So we'll help ourselves properly and break up. Please do also join me in thanking all of our